When Albert Harris first moved to Sunridge Street, he hoped for a fresh start. A quiet, respectful man, Albert enjoyed his space and loved his old black sedan, a car that had seen him through thick and thin. It wasn't fancy, but it worked, and that was all he needed. Excited to settle in, Albert unpacked his things and parked his car along the curb. Just as he locked the door, he noticed a woman across the street staring at him. Sharp, piercing eyes. Her name was Trudy Lane, and she was known for getting into everyone's business. Without hesitation, Trudy stormed across the street, hands on her hips, her face twisted in a frown. "Excuse me," she shouted, her voice sharp. "This is private property. Who do you think you are parking that thing here?" Confused, Albert looked around. He had parked his car just like everyone else. "Good afternoon," he said calmly. "I'm pretty sure this is a public street, ma'am. I just moved in." He pointed to his new home, trying to be friendly, but Trudy wasn't interested in introductions. She scoffed, glaring at his car. "You can't park your junk here and expect us to be okay with it," she snapped. The neighbors started gathering, watching from their porches, curious about the scene. Albert remained calm. "I'm not here to cause any trouble, just trying to be a good neighbor," he explained, but Trudy wasn't having it. "Maybe we don't want neighbors like you around here," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Albert took a deep breath, trying to stay patient. He just arrived, and he didn't want to start things off on the wrong foot. "You can't park that beat-up car here, you should park somewhere else," she continued, louder now. Albert felt his patience slipping. "Ma'am, I've done nothing wrong," he said, trying to keep his cool. "I just want peace." Trudy's face reddened. "Peace? How can I have peace with people like you moving in here?" she shouted, her words drawing gasps from the crowd. Before Albert could respond, Trudy did something no one expected. She shoved him in the chest, hard. Albert stumbled back in shock. This wasn't just words anymore. She had physically pushed him. The crowd went silent as a few people started recording with their phones. "Ma'am, calm down," Albert said firmly, his voice steady. "I don't want this to escalate." But Trudy wasn't done. She jabbed her finger into his chest. "You don't belong here," she screamed. That was the last straw for Albert. He had tried to stay calm, but she had pushed him too far. When Trudy moved to push him again, Albert raised his arm and brushed her hand away. The slight push was enough to make Trudy stumble backward. Her eyes widened in shock as she tripped on her own feet and fell hard to the pavement. For a moment, no one moved. The whole neighborhood held its breath. "Is she okay?" someone called out. The crowd grew and someone dialed 911. Moments later, sirens blared as an ambulance arrived. Trudy was lifted onto a stretcher, her eyes meeting Albert's briefly. She glared at him but couldn't muster any words as paramedics wheeled her away. Albert stood to the side, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. This wasn't the fresh start he had hoped for. As Trudy was taken to the hospital, some neighbors approached Albert. "Don't worry about her," said Sarah, an older woman from down the street. "She's been picking fights around here for years. Someone was bound to stand up to her." A week later, Albert received a legal notice. Trudy was pressing charges, claiming she had been badly hurt. Albert's heart sank, but he wasn't about to let her bully him. On the day of the court hearing, the courtroom was packed with familiar faces from Sunridge Street. Many of his neighbors had come to support him, and several had brought videos they had taken of the incident. Trudy sat smugly on the witness stand, spinning her version of events, claiming that Albert had attacked her for no reason. But when it was Albert's turn, his lawyer showed the footage. It clearly captured Trudy's aggressive behavior and the moment she shoved Albert first. The judge reviewed the footage, and after a tense silence, he declared, "Mr. Harris's actions were in self-defense. All charges are dismissed." Trudy's smug expression vanished, replaced by shock and anger. "Miss Lane," the judge continued, "I advise you to respect your neighbors and keep the peace. Provoking people and blaming them for your actions isn't acceptable." The courtroom fell quiet as Albert breathed a sigh of relief. Justice had been served. As he left the courtroom, his new neighbors greeted him with smiles and handshakes. That day, Albert realized that Sunridge Street had truly welcomed him. He no longer had to fear anyone or feel out of place. As for Trudy, she had learned the hard way. Mistreating others doesn't come without consequences. The end.